My name's Andrew Lowe. I'm a Reedsy editor, mainly fiction. I'm an ex-journalist, I'm a freelance editor, also a fiction author. So in this session, basically I'm going to be showing you how to polish and rewrite your manuscript after assuming you've got your first draft and you're ready to go to an editor and polish it and move it on to the next step. So as an editor, I get a lot of people a lot of authors sending me requests to say, can I edit their book, and what's the process? You know, how does it all work? But I don't tend to get that many from people saying, is my book ready to be edited? Occasionally I will look at a submission and I'll have to tell the author that they need to do a little bit more work before I think it's actually ready for editing. They come back to me, usually that goes well, and they generally accept it and say, yeah, fair enough, I'm going to do a little bit more. So I mean, all authors watching this will know that when you get to when you've done your first draft, you might think you've written your novel, and well done for finishing the first draft. It is an amazing achievement, and it's something that you should by all means be really proud of. But that it's not the beginning of the end, I'm afraid. It's more like the end of the beginning, because there's a lot more work to come. And so finishing that first draft is definitely an amazing achievement. The book is written in the first draft, but it's made in the second draft and the third and the editing process. It's in a way like a film. You know, the film gets in the can and then the editing starts, and then the actual film itself is produced. It's made from all the footage, from the actual raw materials. That's the way I kind of see first drafts and the whole revision process. So so I think what you need to do is to get your manuscript as clean as you can get it, to get it in a really strong state before you approach an editor. And I think maybe quite a few authors might think that they just get their novel down, their first draft done, and the editor will fix it all, the editor will sort it all out. But that's not really how it works. You know, we're obviously talking, I guess, more about copy editing here. That's, you know, the flow of the read, the style, the voice, the sentence construction, word choices. And when I say you need to self-edit to get your manuscript ready for an editor, then there might be people out there thinking, well, why do I need an editor if I can self-edit, if I can do it myself? But here's a middle-class analogy for you. It's not the same as doing the cleaning before the cleaner comes around. It's more like not leaving your underpants on the back of the chair. Remember, editing effectively is an advisory process. It's not something that an editor is a consultant on your writing, and they're not rewriting your book. They're certainly not writing your book for you, and they're not rewriting it. They're advising you. There should be a collaborator. They should be a coach. They should be a supportive force, and but you are not paying them to rewrite your book. You are paying them. An editor does not make bad writing good. An editor ideally makes good writing great. Also, there's an author, David Hewson. He wrote the novel adaptations of The Killing. He says the first draft, I agree, the first draft is for you. The second draft is about the reader's experience. And the third draft, which is usually the point where you're talking to an editor, where you're working with an editor, is about making it broadcast quality, turning it into something publishable, turning it into something that's as good as anything out there. So 5 points. Okay, what I see is you have a distance. It's about distance, and I think the whole editing process is all about how close you are to the work, to the manuscript. And to start with, when you're writing your first draft, you get very, very close. You're close in. You are kind of just getting the words out. You're married to it. You're embedded to all this idea that you've had sort of carried around for so long, and then so what the first thing you need to do is take a break from it. You need to put it away, ideally for a few weeks and months, whatever it takes. You'll be less inclined to be married to certain sections, certain phrases, certain character traits, and with the benefit of a bit of distance, it won't seem so important. So I would say that once you've written that first draft, you feel too close to it, and then the first thing you need to do is put it in a drawer, get rid of it. Not get rid of it, but just put it somewhere where you can ignore it for a while. And then you need to harvest objectivity. Basically, you need to get some detachment from it, because it's impossible to self-edit your own work when you feel a strong kind of an emotional attachment to it. It's very, very difficult to look at it, to look at what you think is working, the stuff we're going to go on to talk about in a second. And it will also save you time later. If you just leave it alone for a while, it will save you time later, because I hear a lot of authors tend to complain and say, "Oh, I want to spend more time writing. Oh, all this marketing I have to do, all this messing around with design, all this kind of business." Well, this is the time you can do that. This is the ideal way to do it. If you get that first draft, put it away, then while it's fermenting or while it's percolating, while it's in the oven, you can move on to design, marketing, other kind of things, all the stuff that when you're doing them, I know as an author, when you're doing them, you're thinking, I should be writing. So you can put it away, work on the other stuff. And it will save you time later, because when you do start to work with an editor, the edit will be less intensive, there'll be fewer rewrites, rejigs. So it's time well invested, I would say, rather than wasted. So the second thing, again, you're getting a little bit closer now. This is the point where you need to, I would say, read it out loud. This is where you need to come back to it with a sort of a different angle, from a different approach, and you need to look at it. You need to hear it in a different way, see it in a different way, see it with different eyes. It's useful to read things out because do the accents, perform it, do whatever you need to do to get this done. It will help with the flow. It will let you know what sounds a little bit mouthy and unnatural maybe in a reader's head, and it will help you to get some distance from this thing that you've just lived with for a long time. And so just getting it out of the word processor of your head and into the open air is what it feels good. It feels good to read it out loud. You feel a bit self-conscious about it. Do it when there's no one around. It's just it feels good to get it out there. And it's not a play, it's not meant to be performed, but it will tell you a lot about the flow, the senses, the flow, the prose when you're talking out loud, when you hear it out loud. Point 3, which is a really good tip that I saw from a fellow Reedsy editor called Cassandra Marshall, and she said she sort of validated something that I do, which I thought was a bit mental, and it's good to hear that I'm not the only one who does this. She said, have a mess around with the font, read on a different device, change the font size, do bits and pieces, do anything you can to it, anything you can to see it in a different light, see it with different eyes. So anything that kind of gets you away from how it felt when you were writing that first draft. And a lot of this is about feel. We'll talk about some technical stuff in a minute, but a lot of it is about sort of formulating a kind of distance, for getting a sense of that perhaps somebody else has written this, stepping aside from it and seeing it as a reader, because you know what's going to happen, you know all the things, all the little points you put in there, but a reader coming to it cold only has the words on the page. And so it's crucial for you to just to play around a little bit. Don't be too concerned about am I wasting my time messing around with this, or should I be more focused on something more practical? just play. Don't be so worried about that kind of thing. And I think by the end of that, once you get to, you're starting to get closer again. You're getting closer to the actual, the detailed stuff. And by this point, you should feel that you're ready to look at the way things hang together and the way things lock together and they work, and all your story arcs, all your points, all your kind of pinch points and your themes. And now this is where I recommend a book. And I saw an article, incidentally, I know authors get a lot of this. I saw an article, that anxiety as an author that I'm sure you feel, which is I should be writing, whatever you're doing, let alone reading books about how to write. The book I'm going to recommend is called Book Architecture. This is point 4 we're on now. And this is really a fantastic book. It's by a guy called Stuart Horwitz. What he does is he suggests that you look at it as a tapestry, as something that's more texture. It's more about texture. You often get this advice about acts, constructing your novel in act structures. Act 1, the inciting incident, something to overcome. Act 2, it's all set up. Act 2, and then you get the crisis point, and then some sort of resolution, then another crisis, and then a final. All of this thing. What he does is he says, that's fine. There are many good books that are written using that method, but there are also many bad ones as well. So it all depends on what's right for your story, what's right for the story you're trying to tell. And so what he suggests is, instead of doing that, look at it as a series of threads, themes. He calls them series, but you could call them motifs, you could call them themes. And he's at this point, you should be getting a god's eye view of the whole thing if you can. You need to be looking at the characters, the repeating themes, characters, foreshadowing, repeating things, plot points. Just have a look at the whole mechanism. Just look under the bonnet, have a look at it, start to work out how things fit together. And so Book Architecture is a great book, and it takes some established works, including things like Metamorphosis, Franz Kafka, and The Great Gatsby, and looks at them, Catch-22, and looks at them in a way to kind of how you could interrogate them, take them apart, see how they work. It sounds maybe a bit nerdy and a bit intricate, but you'll be amazed when you look at something, particularly something like Catch-22, which is, I think, an incredible book. When you see you see the workings, you see the wires, you see how it's all put together, and then that moment where you think, oh my god, I can do this for my book, is quite a revelation. It's great for following specific character arcs. It's fantastic for just how you could just checking that your conflicts are really a crucial thing to check at this point, because you need to look at whether the reader is going to care about your conflicts. The classic advice, make me care. And look at something. I've seen some books recently where some of the conflicts, some of the points of conflict tend to be things that could be resolved if only two characters would just have a word with each other, or if only somebody was in the right place at the right time, or just said, that thing you said, just to clarify, and then there wouldn't be a book, which is a little bit unsatisfying. So what you want is internal conflict. You want the characters to you want their pain. You want the reader to feel their pain. You want the reader to care about it on a more of an emotional level rather than a logistical level. And that's something that Book Architecture really helps you to look at. As he says in Book Architecture, a book can only be about one thing, and that is if you can establish what that one thing is. He talks about a series target, where that's your bullseye, that one thing your book is about, and all your other themes, you need to say how close they are, how close are they to that target. And if you've got a nice grouping at the end of this process, then you can say that you've got a successful structure. So the main thing is make the reader care. There's a great Andrew Stanton TED talk which I recommend to everybody, which is where the director of Finding Nemo, which he talks about how to make the reader care, back to that internal emotional conflicts again. not just kind of logistical sitcom-y type problems. Look at the characters and where they're coming from emotionally, and that's how you will get the readers to lean in, to care about them, to really sort of get a sense of who they are, rather than just ciphers to tell your story. So point 5 is, now, as I said about this thing about getting close into the thing, now you're really close. You put it away. You've got your objectivity. You come back. You start to read it out loud. You get more of a feel for it. Then you look at something like book architecture or whatever way you want to look at the structure and how things work together. And then you look at how it all fits together. And then you get a bit closer, and now we're at point 5, which is the detail. This is where you start to pore over the details. And effectively, this is where you're now close to this point where you're going to be working with an editor. But I would say there's still a few things you could look at before you actually start to work with your editor, because it will make the process go much more smoothly. So I'd say do particular attention. The first thing I do to any new manuscript before I start to work on it, just take a drink for a... Search for very and then delete it. Search for the word very and just get rid of all of them, and you will find that that's a really quick way to lose a few words, to get on with it. And because very, there's a great bit in Dead Poets Society where he talks to his students. The character, Mr. Keating, I think his name is, played by Robin Williams, talks to his students and says, don't use very. It's lazy. You're not very tired. You're exhausted. You're not very slow. It's sluggish. You're not very dirty. It's not very dirty. It's filthy. So there are words that you can, as a writer, you should have a good vocabulary. You should be able to go through, kill the veries, and get better words in there. And there's also an article I found on mentalfloss.com which talks about specific modifiers for very. So I would hope you wouldn't have this problem as a writer. You're struggling with alternative words instead of very slow, very tired, whatever. Then that's a good resource. And hopefully that link should pop up magically in a second. The second thing in terms of the detail is speech tags, dialogue. Your editor will work with you on this, but it's good practice to get used to how best to present dialogue. And the main thing about speech tags is number one is don't use semicolons, dashes, commas, any kind of punctuation within dialogue, because your editor will take all of them out because they're unnatural and they will die a little with each one they have to take out. So get rid of them yourself. When people are speaking, they don't use semicolons. And when you so simplify that dialogue, the way you present that dialogue. Certainly only use said. People don't use muttered somebody or spluttered somebody or squeaked somebody. Use said, not because I hear people say said's boring, can't I use different words? It's not about it being boring, it's about the reader experience. Again, that's the number one thing in your mind. And the reader isn't interested that you know the word muttered or spluttered as an alternative to using the word said. What the reader's interested in is that they don't feel the dialogue is there at all. They feel that it's invisible. It's rolling, it's flowing, and said is a way just to keep it going, to keep it flowing. It becomes invisible. It's not noticed, so it keeps the dialogue going. Ideally, try to present your dialogue in a way that you can introduce a character and then a quote what they say. You don't always have to say said here, said this, one after the other. Vary it and try to kind of make it interesting for the reader. But certainly simplify those speech tags. Tics and overused phrases, you should be looking for those. Again, use the word processor options. Just search. If you suspect a word, you're using a word a little bit too much, then search for it and replace it if you find too many of them. You'll probably be quite shocked by that, because you'll think, I'm a creative genius. Every time I try to describe something, it's completely new and novel and different. But you'll be surprised. And a good editor will find those for you and will help you. And sooner, you sooner or later you'll find that you stop using them. I'm not saying to remove all the poetry and joy and colour from your writing. I'm saying just make sure it's flowing and make sure the reader won't stumble over it. So I think generally if something's bothering you and you can't work out why, then this is where you ask the crucial question for me. This is the question I brought all of the authors I work with, is it needed? And is it needed isn't about it's about what's right for that particular part of the book. So there may be a sort of a section where you're describing something and you want a bit of style, you want a bit of flair, and that is needed. That's fine, it's needed there. But if you have a certain point of the book that you want the pace to be a bit quicker perhaps, or you want to be more focused on action and dialogue, then you don't want to keep pulling the reader away from that with a stunningly lyrical description of something. That's not needed there, and you need to think about what's needed in different parts of the novel, different parts of the manuscript, for what you're trying to achieve at that point. Sometimes it's a lot of colour, sometimes it's much more starker than that. And you will find, I find with authors who are just starting out, a classic mistake is that everything goes in there, and so anything they think, any description, anything and everything just gets thrown into the pot. And as you develop as a writer, as you improve, you start to be more ruthless, and you leave things out, and you realise the power of actually having a bit more space in your writing and a little bit less, making it a bit less packed and dense with things. And the other thing is, we all know about show don't tell, and we all know that you need to show us and what a character does or says, what they're feeling. Don't just tell us that they're terrified. But this is a needed thing. Some parts of your book might need a little bit more telling. Some parts might work better with showing. And this is what you need to develop as you work through this redrafting process. You might realise you're being a bit too telly at some point, or you're being telly in a place where you need to be more showy. And as you develop as a writer, again, you'll see that more quickly, and you'll start to realise. But the idea of you must always show and you must never tell is a little bit too black and white for me. So it's just all about trying to, as you develop as a writer, you realise you will see it, you will hear it, and you will think, yeah, I'll tone down the tell there, or I'll pump it up, or I'll make it a bit more showy and less showy. Is it needed? Again, is that thing? Is it needed in that point? So there's another great blog I recommend called This Itch of Writing by Emma Darwin. She's a writing coach, and she wrote a fantastic piece. I recommend all authors read this, about high definition writing. And she talks about going through, when you're redrafting, go through your descriptions and look at them, look about whether you're needlessly filtering the image through some observing consciousness. Right, that sounds terrifying. But what she means is sharpen it, make it high definition. Don't draw attention to the fact that a character is looking at something or is experiencing something. Just get on with it. So an example, she says, turning, she noticed two snakes fighting in among the rocks. Now, turning, she noticed two snakes fighting in among the rocks. So that's drawing attention to the fact that she's noticing something. Better is, she turned, in among the rocks, two snakes were fighting. So there you've got a more active, much more of an active kind of voice. You've got, it's not filtered specifically through a character's experience. You want to encourage vividness in your writing. Sometimes you might need to, if you're in a scene with lots of people, you might need to let us know who's noticing what. That's fine. Again, the trick is it needed for that situation? Front load the action is another one. Don't make readers hold their breath for the detail. You need, instead of saying something like the girls with their plates sat down, you can hear the pause. It's tell us what's with the plates, but the girls sat down with their plates, or the girls took their plates and sat down. Just sort of front load the action if you can, get it right up to the front, instead of waiting for people to hang around, instead of making people hang around. Adjectives, we're going to finish. I've got to really be quick, I think. Adjectives are fine, but use them sparingly. Try to be more lateral and creative in your descriptions. Recognise again, it's back to the is it needed. Recognise again when you need to be sparse, when you need to more richness and colour. It all depends on what you're doing, the scene, the mood you're after, what you're describing. There's a great quote from a guy called Gary Provost, who's a writing coach, on how to get a more musical ear for your writing. That's to vary the length of your sentences, and he says don't write words, write music, which is a really good piece of advice. I'm sure that link is going to pop up any moment. Adverbs, on the other hand, they can all go. You can get rid of all of those. Not really. You can pretty much be brutal with adverbs. The rest of the descriptive writing around the adverb should do the job. You shouldn't need to say he closed the door firmly. He slammed the door will do. Stephen King said the road to hell is paved with adverbs in his book on writing. You really must read. If you read nothing else, whatever you think of Stephen King, Stephen King is a great example of something I said earlier, which is where when you start, everything goes in. Over time, as he's got better and better and better and wrote more and more books, I think he's left more out, left more space. If you think of his early novels, something like The Stand is about that thick, and The Shining is really thick. And he was guilty in those early novels, I think. I'm criticising Stephen King now, but he was guilty in those early novels of just everything. I remember there's a scene in The Stand where it takes about 4 paragraphs to describe a garage door or something. But that's that kind of thing where you're keen to show off the vividness of your imagination. That's quite an early writer kind of thing to do. And as you evolve as a writer, I think you become to realise the old thing about less is more. And I have to end. I'm going to end on the quote from Stephen King from On Writing. He said, as I said before, fear. I'm convinced that fear is the root of most bad writing, or at least timidity. Dumbo got airborne with the help of a magic feather. You may feel the urge to grasp a passive verb or one of those nasty adverbs for the same reason, but just remember, before you do that, Dumbo didn't need the feather. The magic was in him. So again, draft 1, do the writing. Draft 2, find the magic. Then get yourself signed up to Reedsy, find a good editor, then to make it really shine. So yes, I hope that's useful, and all the very best with your writing. Have a great evening.